Hi everybody, I'm Sam J.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Sam F.
I'm Asher, and together we are Team Portals. Welcome to Portals Virtual Festival.
Hey.
We were obviously gutted that we couldn't put on a proper festival for you as we wanted to this year, so I wanted to take this chance to introduce you to some of the bands who are scheduled to play and hopefully introduce you to some of your new favourite bands that you would have seen live. Sam Jones, tell us a bit more about what we're going to be doing today.
Well, we've been quite busy this last couple of weeks between us. A lot of Zoom calls and a lot of conversations with a number of bands who are due to play the festival from the UK and beyond, I suppose. So we've taken the time to find them in their homes and just have conversations really just about music, about their career so far, what we can expect from them in the future, and really just a general chinwag just to see how they're doing. Aaron, who have we been talking to recently?
Oh, well, we've been talking to loads and loads of people, but since today is Saturday of the virtual festival, we have 5 interviews coming up today. We'll be talking to False Advertising, Midas Fall, No Violet, AKDK, and Standards. So lots to look forward to there.
And between those interviews, we'll be talking about the bands that we have also booked for today, including Flies of Spies from Hell, He Was Eaten by Owls, Joliette, Luo and Totorro, about their music, why we booked them and why they excite us.
So I'm going to jump right in here with our first interview. Recently I spoke to Jen from False Advertising, who are a Manchester-based grungy 3-piece with a lot of instrument swapping and a lot of DIY attitude. They're a band I've been pushing to book for the festival for some time because I've been a huge fan of theirs for a number of years now, since being, I guess, up in the north of the scene with them. So this is me and Jen from False Advertising chatting. Hi everyone, this is Sam from Portals and I'm here today with Jen from False Advertising. Hi Jen.
Hey, how's it going, Sam?
I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's just, I don't know, it's a strange world.
It is a little bit, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. In lieu of playing our festival, we really appreciate it. And we're sorry that we can't be there in person to hang out, but it's great to see you nonetheless. So just wanted to ask you a few questions, really. So your recent full-length Brain Freeze has been out for the better half of a year now?
That's right.
And it's fantastic that it's sort of been that long already, I suppose. Do you have any particular highlights since its release?
Well, we released it in November and then had a tour straight afterwards. So all of the vast majority of stuff that we did was at the end of last year. And then obviously we were planning to do more things this year, obviously. But weirdly, we've only played one gig in 2020, which was in February. So it does feel like, although we like made a music video and things like that and released some singles, actually I think we only released one single. It was all kind of like, this year was all about preparing for the tour we were doing in at the end of March, and we were going to sort of do stuff around that. So it feels like all the highlights were definitely immediately following the album release in November. So it's kind of been like nearly 6 months, or about 6 months since all that stuff happened. So it's kind of weird, but the tour was really awesome. We had a great time. We toured the UK, headlining off the back of that release, and it was all fresh and exciting. So personal highlights from that tour, I guess, were the London show was really good at the Macbeth, and it stands out to me, and the Brighton show was awesome. But I can't think of any low points, really. It was really nice to get out under our own steam and play with loads of bands and meet loads of people.
So False Advertising are a band that have always embraced a very strong DIY ethos. I think that comes across in the way you folks carry yourselves online and in person when you're playing, and how the way you run your gigs and manage yourselves. How have you found it stepping into this world with Brain Freeze, with record labels, going on Alcopop, and I guess all the additional circumstances that come with having that increased responsibility to other parties?
We started working with Alcopop less than a year ago, but we were talking to them kind of about this time last year about doing it because we had the record nearly finished then. And we also started working with our manager, Matt, prior to that. But that was started last February. So kind of coming into the release of the record and planning it as well. We'd managed to to kind of change a little bit since then. We've been working with our friend Luke at the church studio on that album, which is really, really awesome. And that was kind of like us sort of 3 DIY minded people going into a world where we didn't have to be quite so DIY in recording. That was quite exciting and interesting. So we recorded the record that way, and then it's kind of like a natural thing that we would end up working with people to help us release it in a similar way that we were obviously working with Luke to record it. So it was a kind of strange mindset change for us. We'd collaboratively managed the band and done everything, and we kind of held onto that with the artwork and like the physical release side of it, in that we did all the artwork ourselves. We did as much as we could. We collaborated with people on it, but all of the art direction and the shooting of the different aspects of the album cover and release were all done by ourselves.
I feel like that picture of the splattered ice cream has become a perfect metaphor in some ways for 2020. What inspired that? It's a really specific color palette that I feel like you've gone for, and sort of graphic style, like to tie the release together in the singles and the albums and the promotional material. And I'd love to hear a bit more about where that comes from and how you get inspired to sort of create these packages together.
We decided, or at least I decided, that as we were not doing the recording and the release of the album completely DIY, that the visual side needed to be completely DIY. And I knew that from my experience as a graphic designer and working with other artists on projects, and just through our previous experience, I knew we were in a good place, having made our own videos, having made our own artwork before and stuff like that. I knew that we had the skills to do it. I kind of knew that for it to look as good as the record was going to sound, we'd need to put a hell of a lot of effort into it. We probably need to like get better cameras and just spend loads of time on whatever it was going to be, making it look convincing and making sure the visual side held up to what we felt for us was a more expansive and high quality sound, I suppose. Because I guess before that, all of our recordings were way more DIY, and we did a lot with them, but it's like working in a studio, we could kind of sit back and be like, oh, we could have strings on this song and things like that. It was kind of a different way of looking at it. So I think my process as a kind of art director person, it was very much starting off looking at all the lyrics on the record, looking at the kind of the kind of ways that both Chris and I approached our different lyric writing, and the kind of attitudes that we kind of accessed when we were writing lyrics, and how the songs were kind of coming across. I was looking at how to tie all those things together as a thread. I realized that the kind of theme of self-indulgence tied it all together quite nicely. That became like a hook, I suppose, and then ended up doing lots of visual kind of experimentation and things like that around what kind of visuals could represent that. So ended up with loads of different ideas, but the one that everyone liked the best was the idea of the dropped ice cream, and that kind of gradually melting, and the feeling, I suppose, that you get if you remember when you were a kid and that probably happened to you and you started crying and it was sad, or stuff like that. So we found that kind of represented it literally in terms of self-indulgence as something sweet that if you have a lot of, is that you're being very self-indulgent, I suppose. And then also that we could kind of post-rationalize it to represent the themes of the record. What we're going to do next is we've been recording some covers and things like that we're going to start putting out every Sunday, and we're going to call it Ice Cream Sundays.
Fantastic.
Very, very sad. So we're going to announce that relatively soon, and hopefully put out something, probably not a fully fledged gig or anything like that every Sunday, but we're going to share some sort of exciting video-based piece of content for maybe not every Sunday, but we'll try our best.
What are you most looking forward to after lockdown's over and you're in a position to start playing again?
We have some songs that we're going to put out. We did some recording back at the church in February. So we are figuring out at the moment. I mean, obviously our plan was to release new material alongside the touring and festivals that we were going to be doing this year. we really hope that we'll still be able to do some touring this year. There's stuff in the calendar, but we obviously will not be able to do anything if it's still determined unsafe, obviously. So we're trying to plan stuff for next year in the hope that if things this year get completely pulled, we'll have things to do next year, so it won't be too long away. We might even consider putting out a record if we don't have any firm touring plans in place. But we're kind of just trying. Well, we've not completely finished any of the new stuff. We're still mixing it and stuff like that. So it's all kind of up in the air. But we will put ourselves in a place where we're ready to drop some stuff relatively soon when inspiration hits, if it ever does.
Thank you so much, Jen. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to anyone who might be listening today and is stuck in lockdown and bored out of their minds?
I guess just stay positive and do everything you can. Even if you don't feel positive, it's fine, but make sure that you see that there's unrelenting hope at the end of the tunnel. I suppose there's going to be something to look forward to. It's a reason to look forward to when all this ends. And for me, I'm just looking forward to all the festivals. We're hopefully going to, I'm not even thinking about playing festivals next year. It would be lovely to play festivals next year, but I just really want to go to a festival next year. I think it'll be really, really fun. So I think for me, that's my kind of hopeful beacon. But yeah, I don't think much is I'm kind of hoping for next year now rather than this year. So I think just stay hopeful and play games. Playing games is fun. Mario Kart's good too.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for taking the time, and I can't wait to catch you in False Advertising again at a gig or festival in the hopefully not too distant future.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
See you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Sam. That was awesome. Next up, wanted to chat about Flies or Spies from Hell, who are a band we obviously had scheduled to play this year. They are a London-based sort of post-rock band, have been going for quite a number of years and have been somewhat of a stalwart of the scene. If you've been to like a math or post-rock shows, in London, you may well have seen them. And they've just released a new album called Final Quiet, which is awesome.
It's fantastic. I absolutely love it.
It's really, really good. Honestly, I think it's the best thing that they've done in their career so far.
I feel like this last year has been full of bands that are doing exactly that, having very good discographies and then just smashing it out the park over the last 12 months with an album that just is the epitome of everything they've done. I think they've totally done the same here.
Completely. And what makes them really interesting is the different instrumentation they use. Like the new album is really piano and keys led, and it really adds a kind of dynamic element to their music. And it's one of the few albums this year that I can think of off the top of my head that is kind of purely keys led in the post-rock scene.
I mean, that's an interesting. I don't know whether they love it or hate it. They must obviously get all the time the comparisons. But I think it's fair to say that all four of us here are and were huge fans of Maybe She Will, and they must get that comparison an awful lot. But the simple fact is there is a void there with Maybe She Will gone, and I think they're doing their own thing. Flies sound like Flies, but I love that there's those nostalgic feels occasionally. There's moments that just make me also all tingly about music that I love that is no longer current in the scene as well. So I think it's really nice to have those touches in a band that's doing it and doing it well now.
It's definitely an element of the post-rock I kind of grew up with, I suppose, and some of the stuff which reminds me it has a sense of familiarity while at the same time is absolutely pushing the genre forward in its own ways. As you say, I think the instrumentation really helps. I think the seeing this live as well, it's something I'm really gutted that I won't be able to see this year, I suppose, because this new record is so good, and I was so excited about being able to see how this all sort of plays out, because they're such dynamic performers, and it's something which it just sits so nicely in a live space.
Completely. I would really, I can't wait now to see it live, especially with the keys and, as you say, the dynamic element to it, to be able to kind of really touch down into atmospheric and really quiet sound and bring it up and have the kind of typical, I don't want to say generic, but the I don't know how you would describe it, a very nostalgic. Accessible, but also nostalgic, big kind of crushing post-rock sound that they managed to achieve as well.
I think as well, what's quite impressive is that, you know, they've been going since 2004, but this record doesn't really sound, you know, much. I mean, obviously you can tell it's a progression from the same band, but it doesn't, you wouldn't say, oh, it just sounds like all their other stuff. I think it's quite a good development.
There's something really special about bands who have been going around for, well, in this case, for 16 years. That's pretty amazing. And I think, you know, there's something about a band who are that far into their career in terms of having released a bunch of records and played a shit ton of shows, that they are able to do something with their synergy that other bands who have maybe just started out are just completely incapable of doing. And I think Flies and Spies to Hell are a perfect example of a band who have absolute legs behind them and, you know, are showing no signs of stopping because of how much they've been playing together and how much experience they've got collectively.
Well, from one band who's taken everything they've done over their past, learned from it, and amalgamated it into a new record that's greater than the sum of their parts, to another, I think there's a smooth transition there into the into our next interview. Earlier this week, I sat down with two of the fine folk from Midas Fall. Midas Fall, I think, are a band that are very hard to categorize, or have been historically. Typically labeled as much like Flies, they get labeled as classic post-rock, but with vocals, which I guess in itself is relatively rare in the scene. But I think they are, again, much like Flies, probably the first people to rally against the label, because they definitely bring in a lot of other influences, from classical orchestration to, in this most recent album, an awful lot of electronica, and to really blend them together and make something really quite impressive. And well, actually, as you'll see in a moment, we kick off the conversation with a discussion on exactly that, what they consider themselves, and how they approach blending all those things together. So I'll hand over now to myself, speaking to Midas Fall. I'm Aaron from Portals, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Liz and Michael from Midas Fall. Hi guys, how are you?
Hello. Hi, I'm not too bad.
You guys, you're commonly labelled and called post-rock, certainly by the community around Portals and the scene that we operate within. You obviously share a record label with 65 Days Static, This Will Destroy You, sort of staples within the scene as well. Is that what you consider yourselves, or like what would you call what you do? Because obviously it's a lot more than simply post-rock.
I think it's a hard one to describe. I think definitely big fans of post-rock and been listening to it for years. That influence comes in a lot into the music. But so yeah, like sort of some of the structures, some of the guitar sort of sounds are quite post-rock, but I think there's like influences from lots of different stuff as well. Like sometimes we got labeled like progressive or electronica. So there's lots of different things happening in there.
So where are these influences coming from, and how do you go about even assembling that into something that makes some degree of musical sense?
I honestly don't know. I think like when I start, or when we start a project, it's not like there's an end result in mind. It's just a case of let's just start writing, start putting ideas down and see what happens. I think with the last album, it came at the same time where I was discovering a lot of sort of different plugins and software instruments. So I was experimenting a lot more with electronic instruments, and started writing so much with cello, which somehow then seemed to make its way in pretty much every song on the last album. So yeah, I think like sort of the album seemed to capture where we're at that point in time, and where we're at sort of in terms of experimenting with different instruments. But I think, yeah, I like that about the last album, is that we seem to sort of integrate a lot of sort of or all the sort of more, post-record guitars with a lot more sort of synthy and cello and piano stuff as well.
It's definitely what kind of sets it aside in my mind, like my humble opinion, from like other stuff, the kind of big orchestral stuff and the more cinematic stuff, like as Les was saying.
Now that you have sort of a finished product and it's been out in the wild for a little while now, that has all these different influences on, what's the feeling in terms of like moving forwards and how things might change?
I think again it's just like starting to put ideas down and seeing what form they take. I mean, when me and Rowan made the last album, we were based up in like Oban, like basically in the middle of nowhere in the country, and we just had so much sort of time to work on the music, and there wasn't really much influence from other people because there was no other musicians to work with. So it was one of these sort of projects that was just like the two of us spending our time, working on it. Whereas now, like, got sort of Michael and Marco are working with us as well. So their influence is coming into it. So I think some of the new stuff is sounding a bit more like rock heavy in a way. And there's still definitely like sort of synths. Been playing a lot around with like 80s kind of synths and sort of Stranger Things kind of vibe happening and
Nice.
quite a lot of the new stuff. But yeah, definitely more sort of emphasis on like the rhythm section and like their influence on it as well.
That was pretty much the soundtrack driving up from like Art Tangent last year, was just like how 8 or 9 hours of just pure like synthwave like on the way going up. So yeah, it's the glue that holds Midas Falls together. Cheesy, overblown 80s production.
Historically, I guess, Midas Fall has, as a project, been you and Rowan and the two of you officially, and then Mark's involvement came presumably from trying to take this vast scope of sound and somehow make that work live. Was that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when we released the last album, we did a European tour, but it was just the two of us, and it was really a bit of a struggle trying to make the songs translate into just the two people performing them. So we were definitely like, especially when we got like offered slots at Arctangent and Glumar Festival, like we need to like get a sort of proper band together for these shows to try and make it sound like on the record. And so that's I guess how we brought Michael and Mark into the picture. And I'd say we sound like bigger than on the record live, like heavier as well. We've toured Europe a lot of times, and I always kind of like the excitement of touring Europe, especially when you kind of go out into like Eastern Europe and you just don't know what you're going to get. Every day is kind of like a bit of an adventure. It's just like, where are we going to end up tonight? Like, because you don't know where you're staying, if you're going to be in a hotel, at a promoter's house. So I think that aspect of it's always a lot of fun. But you do tend to play like smaller venues where like maybe the sound systems aren't as good. So I think we've really been spoiled recently, having played some great festivals where the sound's been amazing. You've been on big stages, so the music sounds like I think it's supposed to sound live. So definitely Arctangent was a fave. Glumar was great in Germany in November. And although Mike wasn't part of us, we played a Meltdown a couple of years ago, the Robert Smith one. That was a great show as well.
Is there somewhere or a festival or a venue that you've always dreamed of playing that is on the bucket list?
I mean, I loved Arctangent. To go back and play Arctangent, especially with like the lineup that's happening next year, that is like immense.
Yeah, I'm such a fanboy for like Portals Core and Arctangent Core. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, so just like being at those festivals, like, yeah, the set is a bonus, but like, yeah, just being at those festivals for me is like such a joy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of festivals. I can't remember the name of the one in Netherlands. Is it Roadburn? That one looks great. And just I think would really just like to tour as like a support act with a sort of bigger act, because we've done a lot of like headline tours and we've done a lot of support shows with bigger bands. But I think to be able to tour with sort of a bigger band to try to get a bit bigger audience.
Who do you wanna be touring with?
I mean, for me, probably like Chelsea Wolfe or Emma Ruth Rundle. Michael, what about you?
I feel like it's so funny because like I'm relatively new to this, so like my sights are set so much lower than like than like what Liz is like, because Liz has had like a lot more success than I have. So for me, it'd be like, oh, like 65 Days of Static, I love those guys. But then like, I mean, yeah, they're a big band, but like you said, they're like a same label as us. I don't know, like Mogwai or something, I guess, like would be pretty cool. Or yeah, I don't know, just something like arty farty post rock instrumental music that somehow has been able to make it into these like bigger venues, like the Hydro in Glasgow and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I guess Mogwai would be a pretty good one for me. But yeah, that would be like, even like playing Arctangent for me after going as a punter for like a few years was like as like bucket list material. And everybody I've told has just laughed.
It was so funny because me and the drummer, we were just sat on like deck chairs with a beer after we played, and all we could see was Michael just going back and forth between the tents, and we were just like, bye.
I know, I was like checking in with like mum and dad, like on my on my way from like the main stage to the side stages, and yeah, just like even playing Arctangent and like, you know, being on the same stage as like, yeah, like my friends like Frontier are like a friend of a friend. And like I was even on that like Nordic Giants, I was like on the same stage there. I was just like, oh my god, I'm standing where Nordic Giants played. Just like totally starstruck over just being in the same space as like some other band at some point. Is, I don't know, I'm a bit of an embarrassment when it comes to like that kind of stuff.
When the world is the right way up again and we're outside of the upside down, then what's the plan?
I think we're going to use this time, like the lockdown time, to just carry on writing. When we can finally meet again, I think that's when we're going to start putting together like the album, like the actual recordings, and we can get into some studio space and do the actual recordings. And then, I mean, next year, hopefully, if things are sort of heading back to normal in terms of venues reopening, we could look at touring and releasing the album. So I think that's the general plan.
Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and yeah, well, we'll keep everybody posted on how the live music scene develops and when people can catch you in a town near them or a festival near them soon. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. That was really insightful. Next up, we wanted to chat about He Was Eaten by Owls. This one, I think, is a bit of an oddball, one that is really hard to define. They define themselves as polyrhythmic post-punk queer math chamber jazz.
Wow. It's a catchy, it just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked that there isn't a whole cluster, whole millions of other bands cashing in on that cash cow. But I guess you sort of describe them, and they kind of started as sort of acoustic math rock with a drummer as a two-piece, but it was really with their first full-length album, Chorus 30 from Blues from the Hitchhiking Dead, where they expand into a much bigger sound with loads of classical instrumentation and sampling and I guess just a broad spectrum of different ideas.
The lovely thing about them really is, I mean, I've seen them perform as a single acoustic guitar, as a two-piece, and also with a plethora of other musicians as well. And it works on so many levels. there's, as you say, the different instrumentation and the kind of interweaving of ideas and instruments really create something quite special in our scene. And we've talked, we talked about Flies kind of coming into their own with different instruments as well, especially being keys led. And Owls are one of those bands that every time you see them, it's something different, and it's always quite special as well.
It takes some serious musicianship to be able to play with compositional arrangements like that as well, in terms of taking material that was perhaps written originally just for, as you say, like an acoustic guitar, and then be able to have that play out when you're bringing so many other musicians and so much other instrumentation in, and then still be able to reproduce that live. As I was chatting about with Liz from Midas Fall, it's one thing to be able to put that on a record, and it's a whole other ball game to be able to then translate that to a live show and have it not only work but oftentimes sound even better.
There's a word I think about a lot when we're talking about He Was Eaten by Owls, and I think it's coherence. Because it's such, when I listen to those records, particularly the most recent record, which came out a couple of years ago now, there are so many disparate elements. I feel like sometimes it shouldn't work as well as it does, because I feel like it's going through so many different movements, and it's got such variation in its arrangements. But there's this common thread that always ties it together, and it's really just like just deft musicianship, which to guide it into that space, because I listen to it and I have absolutely no idea how it's made to a certain extent, and that's the sort of music which, I love to listen to.
Yeah, completely. I think we also can't forget that this was going to be their farewell show.
Yes, of course.
Hopefully we can make something work with them in the future or next year, but it will be a sad end to a band that have, in the London scene, taken influence from a lot of people and also influenced a hell of a lot of people, maybe not specifically musically, but the encouragement that they give to other musicians to get together and to collaborate, and to all the small art projects and things. It's going to be a big gap to fill in the future.
Shall we have another interview then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Fantastic. Well, I recently spoke to Ellie from No Violet, a Bristol proto weird grunge mathy mess of genres, who are absolutely brilliant and have been making a huge wave in the Bristol scene, having had an EP out and have been doing a ton of impressive touring. So let's cut straight through to my chat with No Violet. Hi everyone, this is Sam from Portals, and I'm here today with Ellie from No Violet.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Ellie. So for us at Portals, you were a band that we were absolutely dying to have come play with us from the first show, I guess, we saw of you. And I'd love to hear how you as a band came to be playing music together, and sort of what got you to arrive at the sound you've got today, because I would posit it's quite a unique and fairly flexible sound in the scene, I guess.
Yeah, we sort of met at uni. We were me, Kerry and Reese were in the same year at uni. Pete was in the year below. We've been through a few rhythm sections, but we found Kerry and Pete. And then the sound, I guess we all have different backgrounds of influences. I kind of grew up with, my dad liked country rock. My mum liked Barry Manilow and musicals and stuff. So that was just always going around in the house. And I guess Reese and Kerry were kind of grungy people. And then Pete likes a lot of funk and soul and neo soul and stuff. So that's probably why it's a bit all mix and match and whatever.
I guess, I'd be curious to hear what artists have maybe inspired you personally from a genre perspective, and maybe in particular, the way you use your vocals in the band. Any artists in particular who come to mind for you?
I've always loved Joni Mitchell and Stevie Nicks and Janis Joplin, and just loud singers. Basically. Well, actually, Joni Mitchell's not really a loud singer, is she? She's more acrobatic with her melodies. So I think that's pretty drilled into my subconscious. Yeah, I love how Joni Mitchell sort of changes tempo changes and stuff, like math rock, but for the folk era. But singing louds is kind of by accident. I didn't really realise I could do that until I had to sing live, because I was always a bit of a quiet singer. And then when I got on stage, it's surprising for me as well. It shocks me.
So, as a band from Bristol, I think it's fair to say that, with the rise of what we consider to be the experimental scene as it currently is in the UK, and so much of that being centered around festivals such as Art Tangent, I think it's fair to say that Bristol's become this huge font of creativity and collaboration in this scene. And I'd just be curious to sort of get your background on it, and how you sort of all coalesced in Bristol, and what you think makes Bristol so special for that.
So many genres flying around Bristol, and so many different kinds of venues that you may accidentally turn up to, or that you want to turn up to. And you just have no choice but to hear all these different kind of genres. And then, I guess we all just get influenced by each other, and then we all become like this big unit, like music unit, and we all have each other, and it's just quite inspiring. To hear all that kind of stuff and accidentally stumble upon something that's just like, what is this? I love it.
Are there any bands in particular in the Bristol scene that have been a particular influence to maybe you as a musician, or just from the scene point of view?
So there was this venue called the Stag and Hounds, where the owner, Paddy, just let anyone and everyone play there. So all sorts. That's where I discovered math rock and stuff. So I came across Chiodaku, John. Who else? So many. Just the Stag and Hounds was the best place to go to get all that kind of stuff. And
it really was,
yeah. And then just made friends with Sir, the band Sir, and then just members of Sang Freud, which I guess was Chiodaku, and then Ash from Leg, and just a real mix of nutters, basically.
So Naval have hit the road a fair few times this past couple of years for, I guess, what you consider a fairly young band. You guys have been going for sort of 4 or 5 years now. Is that fair? Yeah. So, I mean, you've done a lot of touring off the back of your most recent EP. And I guess the biggest tour I saw of you folks doing last year was with Clit Drip.
Yeah.
Who we adore here at Portals as well. And do you have any particular highlights from that run of dates that you'd love to share with us?
Playing in Brighton was one of the best ones, but they've got such a solid following in Brighton. Where else? Cardiff was good, but it was just so much fun. They're so fun. We're all just like a bunch of puppies, all just play fighting and stuff, and it was just got on with them straight away, like we'd known them forever. So that was a special tour.
And so I guess, looking forward past current strange lockdown circumstances, what else can we expect in the future from No Violet? New music, more shows?
Yeah, well, some shows have been rescheduled, like this one. We had one booked with Orchards in Bristol. That was going to be our last one with our guitarist, Reese. He's leaving us. Well, he's left us now. So we're kind of just figuring out our new path and looking at for a new guitarist. So if you're out there, please come and find us. But I've been writing a little bit in lockdown. It's been a bit of a weird time. I thought it would be a time where I've got so much to write about now. But,
Sure.
But it's hard not living with the other band members as well, that we can't like jam, and because we like bounce ideas off each other all the time, and it's become a little bit hard for me to like write by myself again. But started writing a little thing a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh god, don't lose it. But yeah, the pressures, definitely felt a lot of pressure to kind of write and become really creative all of a sudden. Now that things are lifting again, hopefully we'll be able to sit in the same room, or like maybe we'll go to a park and bring some instruments or something. Try not to annoy everyone else with our stupid ideas.
I'm sure you will. And would you think for the next one you'd like to make a similar kind of thing to Faces, like an EP, just sort of a tight collection of songs? Or are you thinking of more maybe grand in scope, like an album?
We were talking about, we discussed an album, yeah. But I think an EP, it's kind of in the works at the moment. So we're just trying to figure out what to do with that. Yeah, we were at a point where we really wanted to, we were just so ready to write more music together. We were like, right, completely new set, come on, like maybe let's just work towards an album. But then this happened. We were like, deflated. But we're working hard, we're trying.
Do you have a message to someone who might be watching this today who was really excited to see you at some shows this summer?
Don't forget about us. We haven't gone. We might have gone a bit quiet, but, hold on to that ticket. We're coming for you.
That's great. Well, we're certainly not going to forget about you either, Ellie, because we're very excited to see what No Violet get up to in the future. And we're excited to, catch you at some shows in, I suppose, probably next year at this point, but I guess we'll see.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay, cheers.
Bye.
Cool, thanks, Sam. That was really interesting. Next up, we are talking about Joliette, who we had booked on their sort of world European tour. They were coming over from Mexico to play Portals Festival, so this would have been the first time we've had any bands from Central America. Would have been. They are I guess I'd call it sort of dark post-hardcore. So they've got the big shouty riffs, the big choruses. They've got a sort of elements of math rock and post rock that are sort of enough for people in our scene to sort of latch onto them, but with a kind of frantic nature of the guitars that you might more typically associate with post-hardcore.
I think it's safe to say that this was a bit of a wildcard booking for us when it first came up, because we heard this record and I think we were sort of floored by it because it wasn't a band which were necessarily massively on our radars.
Very impressed.
It's one of those instances where you think, oh my god, I've got to check more of this band out, because it was pretty much an immediate case of, right, let's see what we can do to get this band on our festival.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's so
it
nice
blows
to be
my mind, just generally, that a band from Mexico would even be like reaching out to us wanting to play the festival.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that we'd stretch that far. So that's humbling in itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll have to eventually get a band from each continent, from every single continent of the,
Yes.
at the festival.
Booking bingo. Absolutely.
Antarctica might be difficult, but we're going to try it.
That's what I was going to say.
They must have amazing post rock. If there is a band there, they'll be amazing.
Glacial.
Well, there's a really good site actually, the Fecking Bahamas World of Math. I love that. I love checking out this website, and if you haven't seen it, please do go give it a Google on the Fecking Bahamas page, just because it shows this massive GPS of all of these different math bands around the world in all of the countries that they register in. And it's kind of phenomenal to see the amount of crazy music, which we obviously never get the opportunity to hear unless we go digging for it. And that's why it's such a pleasure, I think, to get bands like Joliette on our, to play on our lineups and the lineups of our contemporaries. I think it's really nice to connect people to music they may not otherwise be experienced. That's kind of
completely to be able to showcase bands that people in this country especially may never have heard is privilege for us, really.
And it's quite exciting as well that a band like Joliette have built up a strong fan base in Mexico, but they've only come to Europe maybe once, twice before, so they're still kind of getting a bit more established here. So you might have seen them, in the middle of the afternoon at Portals Festival, and then you'd be like, they've already cut their chops by playing loads locally and building up that fan base, and so you hope to be rather impressed with them.
It was certainly, I think, as you said before, like when their submission came through, the impressive thing for me was just the level of, I guess, production quality and professionalism and tightness, and generally just they sound like a band that have already honed what their craft, right? and should be playing big venues and be prominent on the touring circuit globally. So yeah, hopefully we get the opportunity to bring them to Portals still, and hopefully that marks the start of them being able to get more access to sort of the level that they're already clearly playing at.
Yeah, definitely.
Talking about a band who have sort of honed their sound, I chatted recently to the guys from AKDK. We actually put them on in 2016, one of our first Portals all-dayers. That one was at the Brixton Windmill.
A very special one.
Yeah, it was a really, really fun one. And they played, I think they're the kind of bands who really benefit from people who have been there kind of all day. They're in the spirit of things, and they are a band who are a little bit more outside of our wheelhouse, in that they are just like, when they want to be, they just can be full-on ravers.
What are you trying to say, Asher? Benefiting from people that have been in a pub all day and in the spirit of it. What exactly?
I'm just saying, look, if you had a couple of beers, you might be more inclined to dance.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm saying. I know I am.
Even if you haven't had beers, it's very hard not to dance to AKDK.
That is so true.
Yeah. So I guess they're sort of mathy, I guess, but they're basically a two-piece who just have waves of synthesizers, and they both play drums, and they sort of sync in with all their loops and create this kind of cacophonous, kind of infectious, sort of dancey sound.
They're the perfect example of a band who, as a stage manager, when I know that they're going to be playing a stage that I'm managing, I'm just like, oh God, oh no, oh no. Which normally has a perfect correlation with how good they sound. That's just something I've found over time.
Yeah. Well, they've got a new album coming out this year, actually. So we hope that we could bring them back next year. And the idea was to have them sort of end the first day. So fingers crossed we could have them do that, and they'll be able to play some new music. But yeah, we chatted about all sorts of things. This is Asher here from Portals, joined by Ed and G from AKDK. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, all good. So I wanted to know first off about kind of the origins of the bands, because you guys have been going for about 8 years or so now. And I read that your first gig was an entirely improvised set as Damo Suzuki from Cannes' backing band. Is that how the band formed? What's the story there?
Yeah, that was nearly our first gig, but it was definitely one of the early ones. Our first ever one was actually in the Shunt Lounge in London, but it was exactly that. It was an improvised set, and actually the Damo Suzuki thing was exactly the same. So, I mean, he's obviously a legend, and Can a big influence on us, and so it's amazing to share the stage with him. but it was slightly unnerving, even though we're used to improvising on stage. You know, that's kind of where we feel like we're the most free.
So you'd already been sort of jamming together before that. How did that sort of start?
Ed and I had been working together briefly before that, but we met through a mutual friend, and he introduced us, and we went to a party, and we got chatting about drums and synths, Ed and I. And then we were, you know, maybe a few beers had been taken, and we just discussed, like, why don't we start a band which is only drums and synths? Let's get rid of the guitarists and the bassists and stuff. And I think that was, for me, certainly quite, I'd always been interested in keyboards and synths, but it was quite early on in my beginning of my obsession with them. And so having randomly met Ed, we formed this idea that we should just have a band with drums and synths. And that was the only really guiding principle in the beginning, and perhaps still is. And, you know, we've never talked much about what genre we want to be or what kind of band we want to be. It's always just been quite an open space for us. As long as it's got drums and synths, it's AKDK.
So the last time I saw you guys was when you played at the Portals All Day back in 2016, 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
So talk us through a little bit about how things, because you guys have obviously progressed quite a lot, doing bigger venues, and you released Pattern Harmonics, I think, after, you know, since then. So yeah, talk to me about how things have kind of progressed over the last few years. One
of the singles, Morphology, seemed to pick up a bit more radio, so that definitely helped us move up a little bit. And since then, it's been amazing. We've been able to tour kind of all over, really. We were lucky enough, when was it, G? Like, it wasn't last Christmas.
2018, yeah.
Yeah, to go out to Brazil. And that was probably, I don't know about you, G, but one of the highlights for me about being in our little band was to go all the way out there and play shows in Brazil and Argentina, and yeah, that was amazing.
Have you got kind of any standout shows? It could be from that tour or from you know, other festivals or anything that you've kind of done that really kind of stand out to you?
We do each show a bit differently, and if it's more of a punky show, then we'll deliver more of a punky music. And if it's late night club show, I mean, we played one time in Tirana at 4 a.m. in a club. You know, and that was really chaotic and very memorable. I can't really remember it. It was memorable, you know. But no, I mean, for me, the summer festival shows are magic for us, and always have been. And actually, a couple of years ago, I guess it was, we played End of the Road, and played one show on Sunday afternoon to the first show of the afternoon, and you're sound checking in an empty tent. By the time you come on, suddenly it's full and everyone's going crazy. And you know, it's when the energy is right between us and the audience, that's when gigs go off. So it can be anywhere, a tiny room or a big festival stage. At that same festival, we did a secret show with Snapped Ankles. I don't know if you know that band. And yeah, we had a secret slot, like one of the last shows on Sunday night at the festival. And we knew they were there, and we've been in touch and working and seeing each other. So we said, well, just join us on stage. So we ended up from a 2-piece AKDK to like a 7-piece snapped DK ankle AK.
3 drum kits.
Yeah, that was radical.
Probably 10 synths or something.
Exciting.
A lot of fun. And of course, Portals in 2016, one of our highlights. The Windmill was such an amazing venue.
Yeah.
It was like that. We've maybe played it a couple of times there and just always been memorable gigs. It's what G was saying, we feed off the energy of the crowd. And because we're making it up as we go along, it has to be some kind of a two-way transaction, really, just to get us more excited about it. And the windmill, you're right there with the audience. It's punky, it's sweaty and loud, and great venue.
And there's Roof Dog.
Roof Dog,
of course, yeah. I wonder as well with the all-dayers and festival shows, like people have had a few hours already to get into the spirit of things a bit, and they had a couple of drinks maybe, and that sort of feeds into the energy that you guys give off.
Absolutely. I think often, we've been booked on a lot of different types of shows, supporting or playing with a lot of different types of bands. And I think that's a really good thing. And I think promoters see different things in us. So, certainly we've played a lot of more kind of complex fusion, math, rock shows, which is not really what we are, but we're happy to be associated with it. It's fine. We don't really care. You can consider us a dance band or a math band or whatever. But I think especially in those circumstances, when we arrive on the stage with no guitars, the audience love it. It's something they've had a few beers, they've been watching some complex guitar music, and then we come and just bring that much more simple music, but high energy.
You say it's simple, but obviously there's loads of stuff going on, loads of loops, and how do you create such a big kind of sound? There's only two of you, obviously. How do you kind of...
Yeah, the original, when we first started, we had delay pedals, and we were looping stuff just by delaying it on full repeat. And of course, there's no sync between them, so we were desperately trying to play together, and it just didn't work. So we tried out loads of things, and we found the chord Chaos Pad is the most robust looper. So we've got, G's got two, I've got one, and they all synchronize with MIDI and just allows us to build up layers. But it's only got 4 slots, so there's a limitation there, which is quite good as well. You can play against that in a way. And and that's kind of all you need. I tend to, with my synths, I use the 101, and that tends to be bass line. G has, because it can only play one note at a time. And G's got an organ, Cassiotone, which can do chords. So we're, again, those kind of limitations and things end up being the sound, I suppose.
And as I understand it, you're working on a new album, which is out in August. Is that right?
Yeah. New album. It's called Shared Particles. It's going to be out on August the 28th. Yeah, it's been a while coming, but but I'm very happy and proud of this one. And I think in a way, it's sort of a nice blend between the first and the second album, with the first album being just raw live recording, essentially. Second album, we got a few more songs and structure in there. And then for me, this third album, I feel like it's a really nice combination of the two. It has all the energy and psychedelic chaos of the shows with something to hang your hat on as well.
It's always been difficult for us to try and capture that live energy. We originally felt almost like we were two different bands, and we had our live show, and then the stuff that we were doing in the studio was actually quite different, and our first few singles and EPs have quite a different sound, and it's taken quite a while for those two sides to actually meet in the middle. And I think, as G says, this record, I think we've sort of finally closed the circle.
So in terms of the sound, it's kind of like a development of the live sound to kind of mesh the studio and live sounds together. That's the idea.
It's a development. But also, I think over the years, we've got better at knowing what each of our parts should be doing, what space we should be filling, stuff like that. And I think our lyrics are slowly getting better.
Cool, thanks for that, Asher. And going from one two-piece to another now, we're going to have a chat about Luo. So Luo are a band that we've been following for a number of years now, originally as a kind of one-piece, bringing in other musicians. Now they are an absolutely banging two-piece. The new music that they are producing now is absolutely incredible. We had them last year, in fact, and they blew us away so much that we wanted to bring them back again in 2020. Predominantly swapping between synthesizers and guitars with a live drummer as well. They bring an incredible energy, and I think, Aaron, you coined the phrase two-track tigers, which I think describes them perfectly now.
It might be doing them a disservice, really, to kind of, again, labeling a band as essentially being likened to another one, and I know that can be sometimes frustrating as an artist as well to hear that about yourself. But I definitely mean that as a compliment in this sense. But I think, like, just 2 months ago they released their new album Unspoken, and I have not stopped playing it. We heard some of those songs before the release live at Portals last year, and I think those were the tracks that really were like made people go, whoa, what is this? And they're just gnarly and filthy, and they've got guests like Adam from Physics, and it's just phenomenal, and I'm confident, like right now, that is full on a contender for my album of the year. That was released in March. So it's amazing.
There's something to be said about their perfection on the records as well. You know, I think Sleep Spindles being the first one which really made an impression on me, the previous record to this one, partly because it had this like razor tight production to it. Just everything was exactly in its right place. It was complicated, but everything was crystal clear. I really think, the mix work on that is just absolutely genius. And I was quite I suppose curious and a little apprehensive when I heard that there was going to be incorporation of more of this live drum sort of focus on Unspoken. It turns out my apprehension was completely misplaced, because somehow they've been able to keep both the craziness and the this aesthetic perfection while also like incorporating this real element to it, and it's a really impressive technical and musical achievement.
Definitely.
Barney is a phenomenal drummer. Absolutely phenomenal.
I think the interesting thing coming after Sleep Spindles was a much more, or had a lot more kind of chilled elements to it. You could sit back and relax and kind of groove to it. This one, it's a really interesting step that they've taken to go with a lot more kind of frantic and in your face sound. And as you say, Sam, it works so well, capturing that energy on record, which is quite an achievement. Speaking of precision and technicality, I caught up with Marcus from Standards. They're kind of a twinkly math rock band, but with the technicality, but also the groove and danciness, which makes them very accessible and have reached out to a lot of different audiences. Hailing from LA, they're going to be releasing their first full-length album this year on Top Shelf Records. So here is my chat with Marcus. Hey guys, I'm Sam from Portals here, and I'm joined by Marcus from Standards. How you doing, man?
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. So pleased we could have you on this in lieu of the festival. So yeah, I just got a few questions for you. So we'll dive right in.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess you're a relatively young kind of band in the scene. Been around for just less than 3 years, but you appear to be growing quite rapidly. So tell us about like the progress and how it's all come about.
Yeah, well, started in 2017, but it was more of like a side project. Funny enough, like it wasn't really like a serious band or anything. And then in the beginning of 2018, we started to like, hey, we need to put out some work or something. We need to put out something that we can like, show for ourselves, because we've just been playing like house parties essentially. We with like this EP, and it was just 4 songs that we had played, and people seemed to really like it, so we came out with another one, and people seemed to really like that. So I was spending a lot of time touring, because we get emails like, hey, you want to come over here, you want to come over here, and I was so excited to be a part of the Portals lineup, because the previous year we'd been a part of Arctangent, and that was fun, and I loved playing in the UK. I thought the fans there were really, really amazing. And it is really cool, because the only time I'd been in the UK before that was like a little family vacation. So this is another level, coming on your own volition by yourself, and like having people that are really excited to meet you. So I was really excited to do that. But yeah, it's been a huge blast. I've been having fun expressing myself, because I play music all the time. It's like my favorite thing to do. I go to school for music, so to share that with people who kind of care about what I'm doing, because to be nobody really did before. It's been quite a ride. It's interesting too, because we only have 2 EPs out. We don't really have that much music out. So this year we're coming out with our first full-length record, and I'm really excited about that, because it'll be like the full taste of Standards and what it was supposed to be.
So yeah, as you said, last year you came to play Arctangent and played around the UK as well. Were you surprised by the kind of recognition that you had in the country, like away from the US?
Yeah, a little bit. It's like I kind of have started to understand that, like with playing math rock or like alternative forms of rock and roll, it's like there is a select few group of people that really like you, and then everybody else is just kind of really confused as to what you're doing. So when we played the first time, we went on tour with C2I, who is from Glasgow, and he had us on a bus, and we had the bus parked right outside the venue. And there was actually a guy that like stormed onto the bus, and he's like, "I need to talk to Marcos. Where's Marcos?" Like, and I was like, "Wow, that's a first. I've never gone to another country and had someone want to like speak just to me." So you have people like that, but then also like some of the shows, it was like, it was like 10 people there, so it's like it's given, But it seems like people more or less like are really receptive to instrumental guitar music in general. Like a lot more math rock. I feel like the music scene is growing, and I feel like it's just an honor to have Standards a part of that, because there's a lot of bands that have been doing it for a long time, like way before I was even like seriously doing guitar, or even even before I even started playing guitar at all. There's bands that were doing it and like very serious about it, and it's nice that I get to be the newcomer but also be well loved. So it is nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, your album, as you said, released on, or will be released on Top Shelf Records, who've released amazing artists like Giraffes, Light, Trico. How did that come about, working with the label?
We hadn't even ever thought about doing anything with a record label, and then when we came out with the first EP, Kevin from Top Shelf tweeted us and tagged us, and the person that was in the band at the time, the other guy, was like, "Dude, check this out. This is crazy." And I was like, "Whoa, this is like cool. We never got attention from a record label before." And we saw that they had all these bands that we were just like starting to get into, like Toe and Light, Elephant Gym, like a lot of really, really cool bands. And so we kind of like didn't really keep in touch that much, but we kind of were aware of each other. And then they invited us to come play at South by Southwest, which I thought was a really big honor. And we played a little like DIY show at South by in Austin, Texas, and that was really fun. And going from there, Kevin was like, "Look, you're missing a lot of stuff. Your records are not in stores. You want this next release to be big. Like, let us help you. We want to make it like as big as it can be." And so far, they've just been absolutely great. it's really great working with a record label, especially one that is really fair. I've had friends that are on labels, or I know of other bands that are on labels, and you look at their contracts or you understand the agreements, and it's like, dude, you got screwed so bad. Like, I feel really you know? Like, you don't want to be a slave to anybody in this music industry. Like, you, especially in 2020, there's just no point. And Top Shelf is like one of the most ethical labels like out there probably, and they just were really nice to me, and they really just want me to succeed, and that's why I really am excited to be with them.
One of the questions that I'm sure you get asked a lot, but we got to know why the fruit?
I don't know. I always want to do something with fruit. I really like fruit. I think it's really, I love eating it, and aesthetically it's really cute. Like, there's just like so much you can do with it. Like, I always wanted to do something, and when we were kicking around band names, I had thought about naming it like something after like a fruit or something. So it was like always in my head, and we didn't have any imagery that we had made because we're an instrumental band. So there's no lyrics. There's no.
Yeah.
We were just kind of messing around essentially. So we came up with this idea to try to like do something with fruit, and we came up with this like concept about like orange peels, and it like didn't really like look that great. So we scrapped it, and then the guy that I was in the band with at the time, he was like, why don't we do like a big circle of fruit or whatever? Like, it'll be like a ring of fruit. I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like, let's do it. So we had a ring of fruit, and people really liked that. But then when I was working on the second EP by myself, I introduced the anamorphic fruits. So I have like the one that was the watermelon guy, and I was like, yeah, I just want to strike a pose. Like, it'd be kind of cool, kind of cute, you know? Yeah. And people really like that, and so it's cool that I can think of something as like, yeah, I want to do something with that, and people stick to it, you know. And it's cool too because that album cover, the second EP, people have gotten like a lot of tattoos of that, like 4 or 5 tattoos of that out there. I don't know the exact track, but I'll get tagged in like a picture every once in a while. It's really cool.
So just to move on to your like guitar playing and stuff. Obviously, there's quite a few math bands doing similar kind of stuff around. There's kind of a big boom at the moment. A lot of people always talk about tunings. So what kind of tunings do you use?
So recently I've been kind of sticking to 1 or 2, but I always try to just experiment with as many as possible and try to keep the tunings like very open. So like lots of 4ths and 5ths and stuff. So on the first EP, it's pretty much all a variation, or it's just like D, A, D, F sharp, A, E. And then recently I've kind of been digging, like especially in the second EP, it was like D, G, D, F sharp, A, D. And that's pretty much been my like mainstay. I'll like tune it up and down sometimes, but that just seems, it's actually very close to standard. So if you tune it up a whole step, you get E, A, E, which is just the D string up 2 steps. And then G sharp, which is just up 1 step, B, E. It's basically just standard tuning, except you're kind of making it more major instead of E minor. So I really like that one because it kind of, I work so much in standard tuning, it kind of doesn't really erase all the work I've done. It kind of just adds to it.
So with the new stuff you're writing, is it going to be still typical like standards, or are you trying to experiment in different ways? Are you keeping your tone?
So, I mean, I'm experimenting, but I'm experimenting methodically in my own way. So a lot of the songs have the same vibe. It's very much like you listen to it, it's like that's standards, but you know, you're adding things like a lot of electronic elements. And I'm working now, I just got like an Axe Effects today. This is like really crazy. I've never had one of these, but I figured we're going to be locked down for at least like another year. So I might as well just like become friends with this thing. It is still going to sound like very much standards. I feel like people are going to like it, but I think also the cool thing is like, if you're not a fan of math rock, if you're not a fan of like rock and roll in general, I think you'll still like it. It's very much like, it's just music that I think everybody can enjoy across the board, across genres.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really insightful. Gutted we couldn't have you at the festival this year, but hopefully we'll get to see you next year.
I make every intention as coming as quick as possible, so hopefully you guys will still have me by then.
great chat there with Marcus Sam from the wonders of technology, allowing us to sync up with people all around the world. It's great to be able to do something like this in the midst of sad times. But
definitely,
with that, it brings us to our would have been headliners for Saturday, the ever wonderful, ever loved, and rascals, I guess, of Totorro, however you choose to pronounce it. They are obviously fan favorites, well known in the scene, and were, as of Portals 2018, on hiatus until we managed to persuade them to come back and play 2020. That obviously then was not to be. Holding out hope for being able to still put something on the cards in the future. But for now, it bears saying that obviously, I mean, these guys are fun, energetic, and I think the thing that probably people know them most for is the humor that is prevalent in not only their general personas, the way that they put the band out there and their brand, but even within the music itself is full of punctuation notes and moments that seem to be humorous without ever evoking it directly or
completely. I think my favorite moment of the festivals that we've done so far was Totorro in 2018.
I was going to say exactly the same thing.
Exactly. They blew the crowd away. I think they were absolutely phenomenal. And most people who came already knew who they were, but even those who'd known them for a long time were still blown away by that performance. I remember it was probably Toby from Memory of Elephants crowd surfing. I
Sounds right.
remember seeing his legs stuck up in the air. That was just one of those special moments that will just stick in my mind.
Despite an accident on stage as well, of a certain somebody crashing into the guitar stack and still managing to seamlessly keep playing. It was a hilarious moment to watch. In fact, I think I recorded it. So if I can find that clip, I'll play it now. But it's wonderful that for a band like that encompass so much, I guess, that are so casual and so jokey around things can happen, and it only improves the show somehow.
Completely.
Yeah. I mean, my prevailing memory of that gig was the conga line. And there must have been I mean, the room was full, so it was about 500 people or plus in there, maybe, I don't know. And probably about 100 of those people were all in the conga line, maybe even more, just going around the whole of the dome. And I think that even like you said, if you'd never heard of Totorro in your life, it was so infectiously fun, which is not easy to do necessarily with math rock or post rock, that everyone was just getting involved, and that was joyous.
There's something about that sort of music and about the way it's presented live, which every time I see it and a band just completely nail it, that it kind of reminds me why I love live music so much. And I don't know if that's a sappy thing to say, but seeing them play a couple of years ago at the festival completely verified all of the hours of work it took to put the festival together.
Yeah.
And why it's absolutely a privilege and a pleasure to be in a position where we can share those bands with the world, or at least, the 500 or so people who are in the dome there with us today. And I had numerous people come up to us afterwards and say, holy shit, I'd never heard Totorro before, and now I'm going to go check out all their stuff and I want to see them every time. And it's a shame we can't have them this year, but long may the heists continue until we see them again, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's sappy at all to select, because there is something about them, as you say, their infectiousness. I know, like, for me, there is no way. It's just not possible to watch them play without just grinning throughout the entirety of it.
Absolutely.
And if you look towards a crowd, if you're in the privileged position that we often are, to be able to be sort of at the front looking out at the crowd and seeing what the band see, it's just a sea of happy faces with like that, and there's something magical about being able to evoke that in this, no matter what people's musical tastes are. It seems to be a unifying thing.
Definitely. And what surprises me as well is that they can be so energetic and so playful, but play such technical, intricate music as well, still keeping that upbeat, dancey, jovial vibe. It's astounding.
I think they're emblematic of the sort of thing we want to be sharing at the festival and the sort of joy we want to be transmitting to all of our fans, I suppose. The best virus in town, joy. Anyway, on that note, I feel like we should look at wrapping things up, because that's been our Saturday, right?
That's our link. The best virus in town.
Aaron, that's our link. We're going to keep going with this, yeah.
Great,
I think that's a perfect cue to wrap the Saturday up of our virtual festival. We really hope you've enjoyed this today. It's been great to have a conversation with a bunch of these bands and just to really share and, I guess, call out some of these bands we've been able to, we would have loved to have on our stage and hope to have on our stage in the future.
And if you want to delve a little bit more into checking some of these bands out, if you're not familiar with them, we'll also share the Spotify playlists, so you can kind of delve and check out all these bands and give them a full listen. Obviously, at the moment, things are a bit difficult for bands, so if you are able to support anyone and buy their merch or t-shirts, I'm sure they'd all really, really appreciate that, as you might have done if you were in the dome going up to the merch desk. And join us tomorrow for more for the bands who were scheduled to play on Sunday, including a whole bunch of interviews, more chats, and more music and clips from various bands. So thanks to everyone who has tuned in today.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much. Take care.
Cool.
Roll the credits.